in the framework of understanding karma and the mind. It's not the bigger picture, you know. So the first thing is you've got to know that we are suffering and that we can be free of it. That's the point. We can be free of it. That's the miracle. And Buddha basically he's saying is I found methods to get rid of suffering. That's what he's saying. But of course, this tricky thing is you've got three levels of suffering, various levels of suffering. So what we've done is look briefly at the first one, you know, the first level of practice, which is, they call it the first scope, if you like, the lower scope, or I call it junior school, which is the basic fundamentals and nuts and bolts of Lord Buddha's teachings about karma, how there are trillions of minds, and all those minds are continuities and mental moments, and every millisecond of what goes on in those minds and what we do with our body and speech on the basis of what's in those minds is the process that produces who we become. It's a simple way to put it. So therefore, karma, everything we can do is say ripened in four ways. One is a type of rebirth. Two is the tendencies and mental tendencies in that mind, in that person, whether you're dog or human, you know. Third one is your experiences, and really at the hands of others. We're very social beings, aren't we? You know, since we're born up until we die, we're impacted upon by many people. And essentially, it's the people who are nice to us and the people who are mean to us. Good things happen, bad things happen. Broadly speaking, you could say that. They're called experiences, similar to the cause. What's in the mind is basically called tendencies, similar to the cause, which is basically habits you bring with you from having done them before. What happens to you is also from what's happening, what you've done, but it ripens as an experience. Third, in this life, the fourth altogether, is called literally environmental karma, the way the very physical world impacts upon us. So all this sounds a bit abstract, but if you understand, certainly from the Vajrayana point of view, the more esoteric teachings, the basic principle there is the universe consists of two phenomena. Matter, which is made of the four elements. There's an echo here. My voice is echoing. Can we stop it?
Can you just lower the volume?
Do the volume. Okay, right. Turn up. Okay. Now. So then, I forgot what I was saying.
Matter, universe, matter, and
which one?
Matter.
Oh yeah, thank you. Vajrayana model. Thank you. The matter consists of the four elements. Of course, in our old days and back in the medieval days, when Mr. Galileo was around, we talked about the four elements, but now we have a million other elements from the modern science. But still, this model is what works in the Vajrayana system. It's the basis for the Tibetan medical system. It's totally coherent method that's been used. And so basically, the matter is made of the four elements, and there are minds, trillions of minds, trillions of consciousnesses, trillions of sentient beings, trillions of mind possessors. But the interesting point is, as His Holiness tells us, that all minds are inextricably linked to their own set of the four elements. When we understand this, we can understand how karma ripens. So, for example, as Rinpoche says, okay, so according to the Vajrayana model, you've got gross body, which is this bag of bones, and then it's inextricably linked to our level of mind that's called sensory consciousness, the grossest level of our consciousness. Sensory consciousness, okay? The eye consciousness, which is your mind that isn't physical, that works hand in hand with the eyeball and all the other bits and pieces in order to have a cognition from the eye, and then the ears, the five senses the same. So there's gross consciousness or mind, and then gross body, and they're inextricably linked. Then you've got subtle consciousness, which is our mental states, thoughts, feelings, emotions, unconscious, subconscious, instinct, intuition, this entire spectrum of our inner being. That's our mental consciousness, which is necessarily more subtle than the sensory. And that too is inextricably linked to the four elements, but in this case, a more subtle level of wind energy, the kind of the four elements together as subtle air energy, and that all those wind energies combined with those states of mind inextricably are coursing through this subtle nervous system of 72,000 channels throughout the entire body. This is clearly not neuroscience, obviously, it's a different model. And all those states, all those wind energies combined to those different states of mind are all coursing through our different channels. So when your Tibetan doctor feels your pulses, she can feel the imbalance of those wind energies, and she knows it's related to your attachment. That's why you're having panic attacks, So she gives you herbal medicine that works on the attachment energy, that works on the winds, which is physical, subtle, and can calm your mind down. It's a very integrated system, based on karma and the mind. But as Lama Zopa says, for example, because we're saying here everything we think counts. Everything you think sows seeds in the mind and develops those habits. So every time you have an angry thought, that develops the habit to be more angry, but also at the same time, it pollutes the particular wind energies connected to that anger, and that eventually ripens in the future as gross physical sickness at this level. You hear me? It's subtle first. That's the same as the acupuncture system. So if you can get that system and have herbs that fix your wind energy, and you purify your mind and practice and purify and create virtue, then you heal your wind energy, which means you don't get sick here. You understand? It's in this life, you get left right. Then there's very subtle consciousness, and the subtlest level of our mind at the time of death, and that's inextricably linked to the very subtle wind energy. That's the universe, according to the Vajrayana. Oh, sorry, one major point. As Rinpoche says, first the anger grows the habit in the mind. At the same time, it pollutes the wind energy, which then causes gross physical sickness. And then eventually, long term, that impacts upon the external world and causes the environment to be screwed up. And your next life, you get born in a smelly environment, ugly environment, wild environment, or whatever. So everything in the universe is created by minds. It's not cosmic. It's not how we think, that's all. Everything comes from the mind, including the universes, including hell realms, spirit realms, animal realms, human realms, happy environment, ugly environment. It all starts with minds. It's a pretty amazing kind of model, Don't believe it. This is the Buddhist view. Study it and look at it. See if it's a load of rubbish or some validity to it, We are the creators of the universe, basically. Every second, every sentient being. And that's what we can understand the different realms of existence. There are trillions of minds, all conjoined with their own set of the four elements. So this is the point. So if you've got if you practice lots of virtue, lots of goodness, just plain old goodness, you're purifying your mind, and of course you're purifying your wind energies. And next life rebirth could be as a God realm, just like equivalent to what they call heaven in the Christians, where your mind is virtuous and pure, and because you've created virtue, your wind energies are like subtle light. It's radiantly blissful. Humans, we have not got light bodies. Look at them. But still, we've got lots of virtue. Animals, look at that. The predominant energy of the three realms is one of the predominant one is ignorance. And so then that means the mind conjoined with this very gross bodies, very gross mind, very limited mind, intense ignorance and intense fear and delusions. Then you've got the spirits, predominantly attachment, and their energy is more subtle as well. You could argue that their deluded attached mind is conjoined with their four elements, and their four elements are manifesting as like wind energy. They fit from pillar to post, ghosts and spirits, And the hell realms, you could argue due to intensity of anger and rage and harming, their elements are now predominantly fire. So their mind is conjoined with the fire element. You could argue like that, We created it all. Lama Yeshe says, hell is not some place where the devil is waiting, say, ha, I'm waiting for Lama Yeshe. No. Hell, he said, is a manifestation of that suffering being's mind, impacting upon their elements and having karmic appearances of suffering. All created by us, not punishment, not reward, no such concept. There's no punisher, there's no rewarder. The natural law. That's what Buddha's saying. It's pretty outrageous, As karma. Now let's go to the middle scope. Let's go to high school. Given that we've subdued our body and speech to some degree, lived in vows, purified, we're now ready to really start looking into our mind, which is where the workshop is, as Lama Zopa says, So I find this very helpful as a starting point to really see the power of our thoughts. Okay. So we've got sensory consciousness and we have mental consciousness. Mental is more subtle. Thoughts, feelings, emotions. So this is really helpful to me. I find this very helpful. The Buddhist view, I'll use the same example every time. I'm going to say it to you. So here we have sensory consciousness and here we have mental. So, So as Lama says, Lama Yeshe, we make the body the boss. Our body and our sensory experiences, think about it, absolutely run our lives. The second you wake up in the morning, you know your thoughts are going crazy, but it's the feelings in the body that predominate. You know, even you stub your toe, that dominates your whole experience, doesn't it? That's a sensory experience. That's merely the senses. It's not good and it's not bad. It's just merely a sensory experience, and it's either called pain or pleasure. There's only two. It's kind of, well, there's a third one called neither. Get that? It's called pain or pleasure. And we all want the pleasure and don't want the pain, baby. It's called happy feelings and suffering feelings. This is really fundamental, you know? So, this is an interesting way to talk. When you study the mind in Buddhism, you study the epistemological model, which means the way the mind works, which is incredibly fascinating, incredibly sophisticated detail, coming from these genius yogis, plumbing the depths of their own mind, unpacking and unraveling the contents and identifying it, and coming up with this amazing model of the mind, not from a microscope on a brain, but from the inner microscope on the mind itself. It's very amazing, actually. So we have so according to the epistemological model, we have sensory consciousness, and like I said, and mental. And this is showing the radical difference. And this is showing how we get completely caught up in dramas. You can see what I'm about to say. You'll see it. So, okay, my eye consciousness goes here, all right? And I might say to you, well, that's a really nice design cup. It's a very pretty cup, you know? I could say that. Now, every one of us would obviously assume, because my eyes go here, I say immediately, what a pretty cup. We'll all assume that my eyeball is seeing a pretty cup. Well, first, your eyeball can't see anything. It's your eye consciousness combined with the eyeball that enables you to have a cognition of eye consciousness. And so the thing is about the sensory consciousnesses, the five of them, they are profoundly limited in their capacity for cognition. But we give them so much power, you know. So what happens is this exactly. Eye consciousness can only cognize two things, shape and color. That's it. Ear, merely sound. They're so limited, but look how they dominate our lives. And we look at this problem. What happens is this. Eye consciousness sees shape and color. So then if it's all it's capable of is seeing shape and color, you've got to ask the question, which part of my mind then is cognizing a very pretty cup? Well, guess what? That's your mental consciousness. That's where the workshop is. As Lama's open said, that's where the thousands of thoughts and feelings and emotions, and what are they? They are viewpoints, opinions, ideas, opinions, viewpoints, and there are three kinds. Two kinds, neurotic, ridiculous, distorted, you know, like attachment, anger, jealousy, low self-esteem, exaggerated, distorted states of mind that are not valid because they cause things to appear wrongly. Second, there are virtuous states of mind that are valid. So what is a valid cognition? Well, okay, before we get there, so the mental consciousness then kicks in immediately, and I would say this truly, quick, the millisecond my eyes go here, quicker than Google, and this is really true, Lama's open, she says the mind is more brilliant than the best computer on the planet. Quicker than Google, my mental consciousness is accessed, and out of my mouth will come an opinion, usually said very strongly. Are you sure? People say to me, and I say, even if I'm wrong, I'm sure. A very strong opinion will come out of my mouth. That's a pretty cup. So, you know what? This is how we live our lives. We have a sensory experience first. We enter the world via the senses. We see the coffee. We smell the coffee. We stub the toe. We see the ugly, smelly husband. We see the beautiful children. The five senses work overtime from the second we wake up, and that dominates our life. But next second, our mental consciousness is doing this rapid commentary on those five objects of the five senses. Are you seeing my point? Mm-hmm. So this is the point now. So my mental consciousness comes up with an opinion. Isn't it? So if I see Mr. Trump, I don't like Mr. Trump, and I look on the television, there's this man with his brown face and his blonde hair, right, saying those words. If you don't like him, we know your eye consciousness is merely seeing shape and color. I'm sorry. And the rest of it is an opinion. Mr. Trump, who do you think he is? How dare evil, this and that. All the people who adore him, a completely different interpretation. And the tragedy is, all of us believe the interpretation is objective truth. We believe pretty cup is in the cup itself. We don't think it's an opinion. We believe beauty is in Mr. Trump, or we think ugliness is, and that's why we all fight. We don't even know we're having an opinion. This is really why we are up a garden. We can't be up a garden without a paddle. Up a creek without a paddle. Yeah. Up a garden path. Do you understand my point? We live in opinions. So you stub your toe, and what's the opinion? Anger. How dare that happen to me? It's not fair. I don't deserve it. And then I'll see you'll see me being angry, and you'll say, "What's wrong, Robina? I stubbed my toe." I said, "I know that, but what? That's just your toe. What about your anger?" "Oh, no, of course I'm angry." We assume it's normal. We never realize that the sensory consciousness has got one experience called pain, and the other one is mental. When we see this, it's miraculous because we therefore can change our interpretation. That's Buddhist practice. So by understanding the sensory and the mental, that helps us see this. Do you see my point? We make the body the boss. Our bodily experiences dominate us. This is why we're all caught in samsara. We only want happy feelings. So naturally we assume the cup makes me happy, so I'm going to cling to it, and I get attached to it, and I exaggerate its beauty, and then I'll get upset if you take it or it breaks. We know that. We know that. That's called attachment. Let's look at the mind. This is the mental consciousness. So Buddha's really, his view is deceptively simple. The model is simple. The details are extremely sophisticated. But the principle is, in the mental consciousness, we've only got three categories of states of mind. No fourth. The first is neurotic, delusional, misconceptions, wrong, whatever words you like. They're not valid conceptions because they're all conceptions, they're all thoughts. And that's a bit shocking because we think of the emotions as different from thoughts. And I'm going to go into this. But all the experiences of our mental, oh, sorry, I haven't finished. Sensory and mental. Then mental has got two levels of cognition. The first level, the grosser one, is called conceptuality. The subtle is non-conceptual or direct perception, and that's completely abstract to us. And the only time you're going to get to that subtle level is when you've got single point of concentration, an advanced practitioner. We live at the level of conceptuality, which means all the feelings, all the thoughts, all the emotions, whether it's thoughts about music, whether it's intellectual thoughts about musical theory, whether it's mathematical theory, whether it's anger, jealousy, resentment, it's all based on being conceptual thoughts. When we get that, we get Buddhism, I tell you. So how is anger? How is attachment a conceptual thought? Well, it's obvious. Eye consciousness is not. It's just bare bones, shape and color. Then you stub your, forget the foot, you stub your toe. So pain is true. It is a pain based on the way the body is. There's physical pain when you stub your toe. It's a natural law, But then comes the next trillionth of a second, quicker than Google, angry interpretation. How dare that happen to me? I don't deserve it. And it happens so quickly. So we assume the pain in the toe is the same as the anger. Like I'm saying, they're completely different. So now, so those different ones, the mental conscious, then you've got the neurotic, deluded states of mind, and particularly the emotional ones. And there's 72,000 of those. Sorry, 84,000. I always ask the geshes what text when I see the list of 84. They say you won't find one. But they always say Buddha says 84,000. They're subsumed to the three, as Ling tells us. 21,000 of those 84,000 neurotic states of mind are rooted in ignorance, have a character of ignorance, the root delusion, ego grasping, this primordial, neurotic, bereft, unhappy sense of a separate, ridiculous me. 21,000 are rooted in the main voice of that, which is attachment, to get what that me wants. 21,000 are rooted in anger, which is a response when attachment doesn't get what it wants. And the fourth 21,000 have a character of all three. So it's a very coherent model, So there are deluded, neurotic, disturbing, distressing, misconception states of mind, some of which are emotional. Then there's a positive one, virtuous ones. They're our saving grace. The first lot of the cause of suffering, and why they're the cause of suffering in the long term is not that they feel bad, they do, but because they're misconceptions. We have to go into that. The second lot are virtuous. They cause happiness. The third lot are called neutral, but I'd rather call them the mechanics of our mind. The first lot, anger, attachment, and jealousy, are examples. The second lot, love and compassion and kindness, are examples. The third lot, attention, concentration, good memory. Whether you're a murderer or a meditator, you need those. So they're neither virtuous nor non-virtuous. And you've got to understand the meaning of this in Buddhism. It's very precise. It's not a moralistic issue, It's not like punitive. It's a characteristic of those minds. So neutral means neither negative nor positive, but they're totally necessary states of mind. But they're not good or bad, but you need them. So as Lama Zopa says, mindfulness, which is the ability to not forget what you're doing, thieves need it. A sniper needs very good mindfulness. So you use those to help you do your job, especially here in the job of knowing your mind. That's the real job, you know. Okay, if then we've got these three categories of states of mind, we better start identifying them and know what the hell their job is, you know. The first job here, given that we're trying to control the servants of the mind are the body and speech. So you want to control the body and speech that wants to kill, the body and speech that, you know, that is caused by the mind, the delusions to kill or lie or steal. We don't want to control the body and speech if it's going to be generous and loving. Do more of that, please. Don't control them. Do more. And we're looking at the delusions. So now we look at the delusions that drive our body and speech. Attachment, the three poisons. Ego grasping, the root delusion. It has many aspects of ignorance, so we forget that one. The two main ones effectively in daily life are attachment and aversion. So these words are very common English words, but we don't, the Buddha's analysis of them is very, very precise. You know? They go to very subtle levels. And they're intimately connected, intimately connected. So basically attachment, effectively for the Four Noble Truths, attachment runs the show and it causes the basis of all suffering. If it is, we better know what it is. So we use it as a good word in our culture, but Buddha means something pretty different, you know? So attachment, it's multifaceted, okay? Primordially deep. Its first level of it is dissatisfaction. We come into this life with this primordial feeling of never having enough. No matter what I get, not enough. No matter how much food, not enough. No matter how much praise, not enough. No matter how much boyfriend loves me, never enough. Default is never enough. Deep dissatisfaction. Then because we're dissatisfied, next level of attachment is hankering. You crave something. So the obvious first level is the objects of the senses. You crave the coffee, you crave the tea, you crave the boyfriend, you crave the nice weather, whatever. The attachment is mental and you're craving the objects of the senses. Why? It's because attachment believes when you get the cake, you get happiness. When you get the boyfriend, you'll get happiness. When you stub your toe, you'll get suffering. So we spend our lives driven by attachment to get only the nice things and to avoid the ugly things. This is how we spend our lives. All humans, animals, and monkeys all do this. This is a samsara, you know. So we need to distinguish these states of mind and see why they are misconceptions. And this is the part that's really hard. So if all these states of mind are based in being misconceptions, and then you hear about anger, and you go, how can that be a misconception? What are you talking about? Well, let's look at this. It's really obvious. So attachment, okay, the key job of all the delusions, all the neuroses, all the afflictions, and again, this is Lama Yeshe's brilliance, the main word in the text from India and Tibet for all the unhappy states of mind, the main word, you'll see it, afflictions. You know what? Lama Yeshe just knew we never use it in English. It's a dumb word. He never said it, never once. As you could see, it was just, we don't use it. I don't know how he knew, but he knew. So one of the many words is delusion, and I love this one best. So when you know yourself, when someone accuses you of being delusional, it's very serious. You know that they're saying you're not in touch with reality. Well, I can't stress enough that that's exactly bullseye for the Buddha. What he's saying is all these neurotic states of mind, these afflictions, these delusions, their key function is when they're predominant in the mind, they're distorting, they're exaggerating certain aspects of the thing that they're glomming onto. When attachment through the eye consciousness sees shape and color, attachment kicks in and then says, oh, wow, what a beautiful cup. What my attachment is doing is exaggerating the deliciousness of the cup immediately. I mean, the chocolate cake's a better example. You've got attachment to food, let's say. The eye consciousness sees shape and color. Then you have a conception that's called, that is a cake. Well, that's a valid concept because it is a cake. That you can prove that easily. We all agree that that's a chocolate cake. We see the recipe, we know that, so that's a valid cognition. But along with that recognition, a chocolate cake, at the same time, because of my dissatisfaction, because of my emotional hunger, which is what attachment is, because I'm hankering after something, and I get all excited, my eyes jump onto the brown triangle, I identify chocolate cake, I identify it's got icing, and then immediately attachment takes over and fills the whole experience and goes, wow, what a divine chocolate cake. And then hungrily demanding I get it in the mouth, you know. Not here, here. We know where it belongs. Why? Because attachment is convinced this divine, delicious cake, which is exaggerating grossly, will bring me happiness. And this is a tragedy. And this is now we're getting to the suffering of change. Now, this is exactly the suffering of change, the second, the more subtle level of suffering. We can prove it's true. Attachment is the cause of it, you see. But attachment is this emotional hunger, this neediness, this kind of dissatisfaction. So it craves something, and then due to habit, it gets onto chocolate cake. You feel that something's missing, then you get chocolate cake, you get all excited, you start anticipating, you get the cake, your mind is focused, you don't forget what you're doing. What was I doing before? Oh, yeah, getting chocolate cake. You'll never forget, I promise. You understand? You get the cake, and all of it is to get it in the mouth. Why? Because when it meets the tongue consciousness, we know from experience that it will, in fact, trigger a good experience. Buddha doesn't argue with that. It does, in fact, trigger happiness. It does. But he says the mistake is that attachment over-exaggerates the deliciousness of the cake, totally believes that the cake will bring happiness that will last. We don't realize we think that. But attachment exaggerates the deliciousness, and then in the mind is grasping at things as permanent, then will exaggerate that it will last forever. Now I've found happiness. But this is the tragedy. This is why it's called the suffering of change. This is exactly why it's called the suffering of change. So attachment exaggerates it. Attachment comes from emotional hunger. It dumps onto the cake. It exaggerates the deliciousness. It believes that the cake will give me happiness. So we hungrily put it in the mouth. But this is what happens, and this is the tragedy. There's many parts of our mind all working together. So you've got intention is I want a cake. Attention pays attention. Recognition, discrimination identifies it as chocolate cake, identifies it as brown. Eye conscious does its job. All the bits and pieces of mind doing all their job, and the conclusion is it's chocolate cake, and then attachment makes it look delicious, which is a lie. It is chocolate cake, valid. It is triangle, valid. You know, it is warm, valid. It could even be a good chocolate cake, professionally. You don't know. But attachment exaggerates all of it and dominates the experience. And it's coming from emotional hunger, believing when I get it, I'll get happy, and totally anticipating happiness. So you get it in the mouth, which is the goal, and this is the tragedy. There's many bits of your mind all working. So one is pleasure will be triggered. Pleasant feeling will be triggered. But this is the tragedy. Attachment's there, sitting next to pleasure. And as soon as the cake gets in the mouth, the pleasure comes, and then attachment says, sorry, Robina, not enough, put more in. It's never satisfied. Attachment can never be satisfied. Attachment is a bottomless pit that by definition can never be satisfied. And that's the tragedy. So attachment is already bitterly disappointed because the pleasure that lasted didn't come. In fact, you're already dissatisfied, so you want another piece of cake, hungrily hoping pleasure will come a second time. But we know from analysis it's going downhill. Third mouthful, second piece, third piece. And why do you stop from the fourth piece? Because you'd vomit. So to turn from pleasure to disgust. It's changed from pleasure to displeasure, to wanting to vomit. That's the suffering of change. So it does bring pleasure. But because we anticipate it will last forever and we don't realize that, then we keep eating it because attachment's never happy. Mouthful by mouthful, attachment's never satisfied. And in fact, the pleasure goes down. We know that until eventually you got it. And then the biggest tragedy of attachment, this is what my mother used to say, the more you get, the more you want. So not only do you get pleasure, but it doesn't last. It doesn't last. Already we're disappointed. We assumed it would. And then you think, well, the second piece will do it. But in fact, the second piece it's not as good. The first mouthful's the best. We know that. But it goes downhill from there. So you keep eating out of habit, desperately hoping against hope that it's going to bring more pleasure. But in the end, it brings displeasure. And if you're not careful, you want to vomit. And then what happens? You get better over the next day. Tomorrow morning, you forget all about the vomit. And you look at the cake and you think it's going to give you pleasure again. So in other words, the very thing that made you vomit is the very thing that we think will give us pleasure. We try again tomorrow. So we've been bashing our heads against brick walls for eons, Buddha says. Are we communicating?
Yes.
It's not being miserable. It's a scientific truth. It's too painful. It's just too painful, you know? So the point is this, it's not as if, you see, that's where we have to recognize pleasure is one thing. Attachment is another. Whereas we conflate them. And that's why, as Lama Zopa says, when we hear that Buddha says we've got to give up attachment, oh, I've got to give up my heart. You mean I've got to give up my happiness? Because we assume they're the same. They're not. And this is the point, very simply. What Buddha's saying is he's found a method to get happy that doesn't change. You got to hear that. So what's his method? He basically is saying, I'm sorry, you guys. what we think in being in samsara, what we think is that pleasure is what we get when attachment gets what it wants. No, 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 he said. Pleasure is what you get, what you end up with when you've given up attachment. That's his method. That's his method. So you better know what attachment is. You better know it's not the same as pleasure. You better be very articulate and precise about these states of mind, which you can only do if you study low rig. We're communicating, this is technical information. Of course, don't hold your breath. It's going to take time, but it's possible. So the irony is, as you give up attachment, so you get more pleasure. That's it. That's the irony. As you give up attachment, so you grow more love and compassion, and therefore you grow more pleasure. That's the point. Because we hear it as a punitive way to stop getting happy. We think, oh, I've got to give up happiness. No, it's a method to get happy. But the Buddha's saying, you know, when we look at the consequences of single point of concentration, I mean, she talks about it in Mahamudra, a person who's got some level of concentration, which means they've subdued the grosser level of sensory and they've subdued the grosser level of conceptuality. So they're beginning to access a more subtle level of your own cognition. And to the degree that even for that meditation session, it is, you know, it's unencumbered by the delusions and the sensory. To the degree that is unencumbered by delusions and the sensory consciousness is the degree of joy. They mean those words, joy, happiness. As Lama says, ecstasy, rapture. That sounds hilarious. Understand? That's the natural state of our mind. Forget emptiness, forget bodhicitta, forget Buddhahood. Just the mind itself. The Hindus invented this. The Hindus saw this. The mind has the potential, once it's subdued the delusions, even temporarily, to be radiantly happy, be radiantly joyful. And as all the meditators say, even if you have a nice meditation experience, even just a short one, that joy is completely peaceful. When it's joy triggered by the senses, it's kind of berserk, as Lama said. I remember Venerable Rene, our wonderful Swiss monk who's a meditator. I interviewed him in 95 at one of his first big retreats, right? Doing single point of concentration. It's described in 9 stages of cultivation. Lama mentions it in Mahamudra. And so, you know, he said he maybe got to about the 5th of the 9 stages, which is already pretty subtle. Already by that point, your senses are pretty much really subdued and your grosser conceptuality is really subdued. He said that I forget the words, but the joy his mind experienced just naturally was superior to any joy he'd experienced in his mental consciousness, remember, and his sensory that he'd ever had through his senses. So in other words, the sensory consciousness is very gross, and our mental states, attachment, aversion, all these dramas kind of stir up the mess, you know. And the only way we know how to get any pleasure, most of us, is through the senses. That's it. You know, we don't even quite know how to get happy feelings in our mental consciousness. We don't even know. It seems to come by accident, you know. So the point is, once we discriminate between the sensory and the mental, that already is a revelation. Because, this is the point, because, as Lama points out, this is scientific, like I'm saying. The sensory consciousness, which is the part of our mind through the body, we know that the pleasure, it can't last. I mean, even if you have the best massage on the planet, if you keep having a massage 1 hour, 2 hours, 3 hours, non-stop, you would die of exhaustion and complete aversion and disgust, wouldn't you? You'd be revolting. Are you hearing me? I remember reading about this woman, this is amazing, who was having, you know, using this model, her energies were completely berserk. She was having orgasmic experiences all the time. She was in total agony. She lived in hell. Are you hearing me? Can you hear that? If cake, what is saying? If cake is the main cause of that pleasure, then the more cake you eat, the more the pleasure. We know it's the exact opposite. That's the limitations of the senses. This is not moralistic. It is scientific truth. Are you hearing me, people? The way they say it in the teachings, that I mean, the Tibetans sound so fundamental, especially when Lama Zopa talks. They sound so fundamentalist, you know, like you're not having any pleasure, it's terrible. blah, 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 But if you analyze it carefully, it's really provable. But as Lama Zopa says, sensory pleasure can't grow, but mental pleasure, based on practicing virtue and giving up attachment and aversion, it can grow limitlessly. Even in concentration meditation, first Lama says, the joy is totally sensory and it's incredible. Nothing wrong with it. But eventually, as your mind gets more subtle, it becomes purely mental, which is much more profound. I'll be communicating. It's a very interesting way of seeing the world, and it's a very different model. Not neuroscience, that's for sure. It's hard work, okay? But I think understanding the principles can help us. Any questions about that? Yes, good.
Thank you, Venerable.
Go, darling, yes.
Sharon.
Come with the mic, please. Good, darling, wonderful. Thank you. What's Saint's name? What's
I'm
his name?
Sharon.
Hernani.
Who?
Hernani.
Hernani.
Yes.
Saint. You mean, no, I'm in the saint. What's his name?
Hernan.
Who?
Hernan.
Hernan.
Yes.
And she's Tnani.
I'm Sharon.
Oh, you're Sharon. Well, who's Hernani?
Hernan.
Mike.
But you just said it's Hernan.
Hernan. He's from Brazil, so it's Hernani.
Oh, you're Nani.
Yeah.
Hernani. Okay, honey. Thank you. Thank you, Hernani. I was calling him Saint. Okay? He's probably, maybe you don't know what his mind is like. He's maybe just good at looking kind. Are you genuine? Are you good? Are you kind in your heart, Hernani? Are you kind in your heart?
Yeah.
Is he handsome? What's he say?
You're embarrassing him.
I know I am.
Is the,
Don't worry about it. It's not perfect. Anyway, go on. Go, sweetheart. Go, Sharon.
Oh, okay.
Go, darling.
So this is probably very simple for you.
It's all simple.
to
Don't worry.
answer
Come here.
to me. So we're talking about the chocolate cake, and so the best thing to start to do then is to talk yourself out of wanting the cake, because
Well, okay. Keep going. Say more.
because then you kind of have to talk to yourself and say, this isn't gonna be what I
Okay,
think
I
it's
understand.
gonna be.
Okay, there's levels and levels and levels of practice, Sharon.
Yes.
Sharon. Okay, good. So thank you so much. Levels and levels of practice. So ideally, okay. Well, first of all, it all depends on how strong your attachment is. If your attachment is to alcohol and you're completely addicted, we know you've got no choice. If you want to stop suffering, you've got to be very radical and you've got to cut all consumption of the alcohol. You can't just tell your mind to do it. You've got to really be suffering. You've got to really decide to keep your hand in your lap and the alcohol on the table. Your mind is tortured. So you leave your mind, you can't begin to work on your mind yet. You've got to make a decision with your mind that I've got to give up that object. You understand my point? That's really clear, isn't it? So if you're not so attached to chocolate cake, then at least you can think, well, it's not what I really think. My attachment's exaggerating its deliciousness. It's not really true. And this is where we can use the bodhisattva path, as Lama Zopa would suggest, before you shove it in the mouth mindlessly, like we did for our lunch. You think, if I'm going to eat it to be more healthy, I'm going to eat it so I can be, and then you even offer it to others, and then you eat it and you'll get some pleasure from it, and then it'll be virtuous, but you put a good motivation in. But if we just follow the attachment, just blurt it in the mouth and the rubbish comes. So there's levels and levels of practice, depending on your attachment, how strong it is. But there are ways with the bodhisattva path that we can redeem it, make it virtuous by putting a positive motivation in there. But the first level of practice is indeed to look at the attachment. And the main one is to say to yourself, well, it looks divine, but realize that's just attachment making up a story. And at least, as Lama Zopa says, try not to believe the story, that it's not objectively true. That's pretty powerful. That's putting emptiness into practice. And then you eat the cake as well as you can and try to enjoy it and not shove it too many pieces in. Do you understand?
Oh, so you can still eat the cake after.
Well, that's what you've got to decide. Of course you do. It's not, darling, given that we've got a human body and senses, and we're not like the great yogis who can just live on the air, then you got to learn. The first level of practice is be controlled, discipline. Don't put 6 pieces in. And then we get to the second level, which is the mind. You can be a bit more deep in your analysis, and you interpret and go, well, attachment's lying to me. I know it's not as delicious as it looks. Do you understand? So then you tell yourself that, and then with all that, and then plus offering it, then good, you've done something useful with it, and you're learning something, and then you try to get some pleasure and enjoy it, and not put too many pieces in. So that's practice. All that's practice.
Mm-hmm.
You understand?
Yeah.
You understand?
Yeah.
You've got to know where you're at. If it's alcohol, you can't afford to play with it. If you're really totally attached to food where you're going to be totally mentally disturbed, you've got to give up the cake. You've got to know where you're at. you understand me?
Yeah, yes, yeah.
You know your mind
It's
well.
kind of like alcohol, I know is gonna destroy me, but I don't know that the chocolate cake is gonna destroy.
No, but you know if your attachment's that strong.
Attachment.
Well, I mean, food will. I mean, look at people who are obese. I'm sorry, I mean, they might have sicknesses, but it's just putting too much food in. Not being rude.
Yeah.
Or look at sicknesses caused by chocolate cake. Then, like I said, if you get diabetes, then you're going to be strict and don't have the cake. So you've got to know where you're at, what your mind is, what your health is like, and you make all these decisions, you know. But the general practice is not to believe it is as delicious as your attachment thinks. That's a very profound practice. And then, of course, adding the bodhicitta one, offering it to others before you put it in the mouth, that's really profound. That makes the action much more positive.
So even if somebody else isn't there, are you saying that? Are you saying that? Or am I?
You mean offering it? The
Yeah.
offering is mental. So before you have your dinner, before you have your meal, like we did for lunchtime briefly, there's the food. So you're thinking, well, it's not as delicious as I really think it is. That's attachment lying to me. So already that's practice. You're calming yourself down. Then you think, well, I'm going to think of imagining if I could, I'd offer it to all the beings of the world. Even just that simple thought of generosity totally changes the action of eating. Because the key thing about karma, which I haven't gone through deep enough, the key factor that determines the character of the actions you do, which is to say whether it's negative or positive, which in turn determines the seeds you plant, which determines whether a result is happiness or suffering, is the motivation. You see what I'm saying? So if you eat it with gross attachment and greed, that can only harm you. If you eat it with kindness and generosity, that can benefit you. You see my point? Because your mind determines whether it's a virtuous or negative action. Can you hear that?
Yes. So almost every single action, if you're really,
Go on.
so like every single action, like if you're conscious, like really conscious.
That's right. Become intentional. Yep.
Of everything you do.
Yep.
You can put a
Precisely.
good motive
That's the point. That's the Mahayana approach. That is, and that's, see, most of us, okay, if you're going to do the wisdom wing, like we're talking, the best way to do the wisdom wing is give up sex, drugs, and rock and roll and go to the mountains and get some realizations. 99% of us won't do that. So Lama Zopa is always giving us methods to practice that, but to get to the compassion wing and put in some of those components, like do it out of compassion, do it out of kindness, with the wish to be generous to others. That redeems the action. If you just do it greedily, you're only harming yourself. But if you do it with generosity, and if you could, you would offer it, that's already shifts the action, shifts the karma you're creating. You see my point? Yeah, good, wonderful. Yes, they can redeem everything. Yes, exactly. That's exactly right, Joe.
Yeah.
Well, I mean, best not to kill and lie and steal. Best not to kill and lie and steal. Don't.
Oh yeah.
So the very one is just don't harm. But the next one is based on attachment. We can redeem those. You know, the food, you know, whatever you do to have pleasure. You understand?
Mhm.
Everything else. Yeah. What else, people?
Venerable Robina, so what you're saying with the attachment, if we take that example and take it to its logical conclusion, if we can see that clearly, the conclusion, we can make a decision based upon what will happen.
Say that in another way.
If we think
Can you?
about
I think we need the
cake,
microphone, please.
Okay. Yeah.
Hang on, it's good for the people to hear. I know that camera. Go on. Say it, sweetheart.
if we-
Speak it out a bit more.
The chocolate cake, we take that to its conclusion that it's only temporary.
Close to the mic.
Or if we want that pair of shoes and they're not really gonna make me look that good. It's only temporary shoes. So do I really need those shoes?
See, all of that is good. See, that type of approach too is good. That counteracts attachment. And then if you do decide you need a new pair of shoes, choose some nice shoes, but be more relaxed about it. That's like the cake. Be more relaxed about it, less grasping. Then already your mind is changing, and then it becomes less deluded, less suffering. That's true. Exactly that. Yeah.
It's I heard a wise man say that
Close to the mic.
the wanting is sometimes more pleasurable than the having.
No, it's true. It's very, very, very true. All the anticipating is very exciting, isn't it? And then already you're disappointed by the time you get home. The shoes aren't as good as you thought. That's true because attachment exaggerated them. That's the big one we can learn. We see things through our color, you know, rose-colored spectacles. That's attachment. That leads us up garden paths. We can see it, you know? Yeah, exactly. Good point. Yes,
Like being attached to a person.
this is a
and
major
seeing
one, isn't
them-
it?
Yeah, seeing them in light that is really not realistic.
No, it's true. So when you're in love with somebody or when a mother with her baby or her child, I mean, the biggest attachment is mothers and their children, I think. That's a massive one. There's love there, amazing love. But you know, the love is the wish that they try to be happy, but sometimes can be completely dominated by attachment, fear of, you know, wanting the kind of, okay, let's talk about attachment. Well, we've got to talk about attachment. Okay, let's just start talking about attachment. Lama usually says, I can tell you about attachment for one whole year. We'll never begin to understand it until we start looking deeply inside. So basically, again, there's a deluded states of mind, have the function of exaggerating, distorting, embellishing. In that literal sense, they're not realistic states of mind. Attachment is the main one effectively in daily life. It's always is coming from emotional hunger. It always hankers after something. It then goes on to the object and makes the object more beautiful. And then we hold on to it and possess it as ours. All of that's a function of attachment. So of course, and then when it doesn't get what it wants, which can be 1,000 times a day, that arises the other state of mind, which is called aversion. So more volatile aversion is anger, shouting and yelling. Milder levels of aversion are called disappointment, frustration, you know, annoyed. They're all polite, quieter levels of anger. And we all have those, but we don't pay attention to them because they're not strong, you know, but they are thwarted attachment. So attachment is always this emotional hunger that wants the most cruel, but the most effective way to talk about attachment. It is this very nervous, very fragile part of us that desperately only ever wants everything to be lovely. It can't cope with problems. It desperately wants everything to be nice. So when attachment gets what it wants, your daughter behaves herself, your hubby is kind, the chocolate is delicious, then attachment's getting what it wants. But the second it's the wrong chocolate cake, the hubby's mean to you, or the kid doesn't do what you want, that second, when attachment doesn't get what it wants, aversion arises. And depending on the kid, I mean, people want to murder their children sometimes, I hear that, you know. I always say if I had kids, they would be dead, definitely.
Yeah.
I'm amazed your daughters aren't dead. So attachment, aversion is the response when attachment doesn't get what it wants. When we can see that relationship is very profound, I tell you. The cause of anger, in other words, is attachment. Anger is this panic attack that just can't stand the problem. All we want with aversion, annoyance, irritation, frustration is to make the problem go away, to get again what attachment wants. So we go between these two 1,000 times a day, I tell you. We're like fragile children that make us completely crazy. So if you have attachment, it's emotional hunger, dissatisfaction, hankering after something. And then, of course, you want it to, and then if the person, a strong attachment wants them to do what you want. Because attachment by definition is totally self-centered. It's hard to hear it. It's by definition the voice of I, you know. And what nice means is what I think is nice. So attachment only wants what I want, because that's what it thinks is nice, what I want. And that's what drives us. And that's why we're so fragile. That's why we have anxiety. Anxiety is the meeting point of attachment not getting what it wants, or thinking it won't come, or hoping it doesn't come. And the panic attack, it's like shaking. The mind is shaking because attachment mightn't get what it wants. We think of attachment not getting what it wants. So we have all this anxiety. It's like mild aversion, you know. We're all of us like this. This is worry, this is fear. All the delusions are rooted in fear. They are rooted in fear. They are the voices of fear. All of them.
Fear of lack. Fear of lack.
Fear, no, just primordial. Okay, how to talk. It's a very good point. Okay. Attachment, the fear of attachment is that it won't get what it wants. The fear of anger is just getting what it doesn't want and you can't cope. You see my point? That's really the way to say it. They're both rooted in fear. So attachment, how people talk about thinking of the things you can't get or anticipating all the good things. So we either anticipate all the good things, which is attachment, living in a fantasy world, and then disappointment when it doesn't happen. So fear is in both. Fear of attachment is always wanting, panicking that you mightn't get it, and then aversion is panicking when you do get it. It's wrong. So it's always there in one way or another, fear, you know. Wow. I know it's intense, isn't it? We can see that. And we all know the disease called attachment. I mean, called anxiety. That's just the interplay between attachment and aversion. Understand? Yeah. Anger in its nature is extreme. If you look at a person shouting and yelling, we go, oh, look at that, she's angry. But actually they're having a serious panic attack. You see, we just call it anger. When we say panic attack, we think, oh, the poor person's suffering. But anger is a panic attack. How dare you do that to me? They're completely unable to cope. It's just a panic attack. But we don't like people angry, so we call it bad, you know? Because it just can't cope. We can't. So anger, when it's mild, that's what depression is. So it's mild anger, when attachment doesn't get what it wants, for people who are more patient, is annoyed, frustrated, upset, irritated. Do you understand? And we all know those. But the tragedy is we think that's normal. If you go to your therapist and say, I got annoyed today, she will laugh at you and tell you to shut up and go home and wait till you want to kill your hubby before you come back to her. So we wait until it's too late to do something about it. We just think annoyance and irritation and anxiety are normal behavior, but they're just attachment and aversion playing out. And if we start to practice and this is where the Buddha, what he's offering us, forget emptiness, forget nirvana, forget bodhicitta. With this skillful approach called even just concentration meditation, 5 minutes of mindfulness meditation in the morning, you're training yourself just to watch your breath, let's say. A simple like training. You're focusing, you're attempting to train your mind to stay on one thing. You're not going to be successful, but you're training. You wander off, you bring yourself back to the breath. You wander off, you bring yourself back to the breath. So you're training your mind to stay on one thing. So the effort of doing that, you can't help, in the back of your mind, all your crazy thoughts are there, but you're not buying into them. So you can't help but see them, which is better. When you come into the kitchen after your 5-minute session, whereas once, as soon as your hubby's slurping his coffee, you would have blurted out the anger before you even realized it was in the mind. But now, because you've been training and you're noticing your mind, you're going to catch the thoughts, the angry thoughts, before they get to the mouth. And then you discuss it with yourself. Shut up, Robina. It's just only coffee. Let him serve his coffee. It's okay. And you calm yourself down, and then you didn't say the words. That's the skill. But we don't notice. Our tragedy is in our culture, we don't notice what we're thinking deeper down until it gets to the surface as emotion, when the body's shaking. It's only then we notice. And that really is like noticing that your wheels are about to fall off at 120 miles an hour on the freeway. Means you've never noticed they were wobbling if you don't pay attention. That's our big tragedy in the West. That's why we all have just mental breakdowns, and then we think we've got to sneak off to a therapist embarrassed, or take pills. But if we can take this simple skill to watch our mind first, control your behavior, control the speech, and then do a little session every day, begin to become aware of your crazy thoughts before they get to the surface. And so whether you're a volatile person or a quiet person, the same result. So what happens is, if you're an angry type person, you only know you're angry when the words are vomiting out and the damage is done. Or you're in bed inert because you're so depressed. Oh, I'm depressed. It's too late. We've got to see before the thoughts deep down that inform the emotions. That's the biggest skill we can apply daily life. And it's so practical. Do you understand?
Yeah.
Watching like a hawk, That's why first level, at least control the body and speech. At least don't say the words. At least don't put the cake in first. Do the thinking first, and then the body and speech first, then the mind. And then we can begin to really, as Lama puts it, be our own therapist. It's not kidding. This is a really practical application of Buddha's teaching. Very practical, I tell you. What else, people? Yeah.
Two things. You just said body and speech first and then the mind.
Start again, darling.
You just said body and speech first and then.
Yeah,
the
see,
mind?
that's junior school. Entry level junior school is control the body and control the speech. Don't kill, don't steal, don't lie.
Right.
And so he doesn't say don't have 7 pieces of cake, but we can assume that that's a good idea. You're controlling the servants of your mind first. So if we can do that, I mean, we mightn't go around killing and raping too many people in our lives. You understand that, Bob? But
Yeah.
look at our mouths. Look how we vomit out words.
Yeah.
We criticize the politicians. We shout at the kids. If we can control that one first, 90% of your damage you do will not be done. And then the miracle of controlling your speech and your body is then you begin to see your mind. You do both together, but the body one and the speech one are the servants. We don't even notice what they're doing. They just blurt out. That's really pretty intense. If we can control our speech in one day, we'd be transforming ourselves. You understand?
Yes.
Go on. Yeah.
Can you talk a little more about mental pleasure having virtuous motivation?
Say it again. What?
May you talk a little bit more, please, about mental pleasure having virtuous motivation?
What was the word in between pleasure and motivation?
Mental pleasure having virtuous.
The word was and, virtuous motivation.
You said mental pleasure is having.
Oh, okay.
virtuous
I hear you.
motivation.
Now I hear you. Okay, good. Let's look into this. Okay, good. Okay. Mental pleasure. Okay. Pleasure or pain. There's pleasure or there's pain. There's suffering feelings. And the word in Tibetan, the word in Buddhism, sorry, for this is called feeling, not in the way we think of emotion. It's a very specific word. And it's curious. I've got to explain this now. It might sound a bit weird. Remember, we've got the three categories of states of mind. You've got neurotic, deluded, emotional, unhappy ones. You've got the positive, virtuous ones, which can include emotion, love, and compassion. They're positive. The third lot, they call them neutral, but I like to call them the mechanics of the mind. So please, again, I want to say this one. They are intention, attention, concentration, good memory. They're all like, whether you're a murderer or a meditator, you need these. Can you hear this point? You can hear it, can't you? And they inform your ability to be a good shooter, or they inform your ability to be a good meditator or a good cook. So they're neither good nor bad. They're neither virtuous nor non-virtuous. They're mechanical parts. I like to say that. So then, okay, so now in that category, oddly enough, the one called feeling is there. So let me explain. Not an equivalent of an emotion, not used in that same way at all. It's a very precise word, and there's only three kinds of feeling: pleasant, unpleasant, or neutral. So like I said, forget the neutral. We've got pleasant and unpleasant. So that means, in other words, pleasant is happy, or very happy, or ecstasy. I mean, lucky you, you know. So blissful pleasure, or just mild pleasure. And then the other one is unpleasant or suffering. It could be intense suffering, agony of the body because you're sick all the time, or it could be mild displeasure, like a slight stub of the toe. Can you see my point? So it's called feeling, and there's pleasant or unpleasant, and they are the words for happiness and suffering. So, okay. Now we've got sensory and we have mental. So sensory pleasure or sensory pain is you stub your toe. That's sensory pain. Mild one, or you get beaten up, that's intense sensory, isn't it? But along right there, we know immediately you're going to have the delusions. This is the delusions first, in the first category. The anger will come, or the attachment will come. And they dominate. But also, let's say you know, if you have, okay, this is very tricky. Let's just look at the pain one first. So there you have stubbing your toe, which is purely sensory. And then immediately a delusion, the first category will come, and anger will get angry, upset. How dare it happen to me? But at the same time, you could argue there's also mental displeasure. It's hard to distinguish it because we're not even aware of our thoughts. But there's also there, mental displeasure, mental pain. You understand? But it's not the same as delusions. It's quite subtle to see the difference, but that's just to know it's there. But now the same with the virtuous one. Let's say, you eat the cake, and it triggers pleasant feelings. Well, that's sensory first, isn't it? You see my point? That's sensory consciousness, having the pleasure when the cake meets the mouth, meets the tongue. That's called sensory pleasure. But then again, attachment kicks in, which makes it more delicious than it really is. You get all greedy. And then at the same time, there's very little mental pleasure there. There's very little because the sensory is so dominated. So therefore, mental pleasure. The only time we begin to get mental pleasure is when you, let's say, are kind to someone. Let's say you're kind. Let's say you reach out to somebody and you're kind to them. You like, let's say a person drops their wallet and you pick it up and they smile at you. You could argue that's not sensory at all, is it? That's called mental pleasure. You get some pleasure, don't you? Attachment could also be there, thinking, oh, I'm a special person. But there's mental pleasure when someone smiles at you. It's not sensory at all, is it? That's mental pleasure. Understand? So how we have to grow mental pleasure is by being virtuous. It takes time, but by practicing less attachment, less anger, and more love and more kindness. That's what ripens in the future as a mind that's more happy, more content, more fulfilled, which is the happiness, mental happiness, but it comes as a result of practicing virtue. You get my point? It can be immediate. You're loving now, you get a moment of pleasure, but for long-term pleasure, we can guarantee that you wake up in the morning with happy feelings. That comes from practicing virtue and stopping practicing non-virtue. It's a long-term result. You get my point?
Absolutely.
Can you hear it? Yeah.
Thank
you. Okay. And that's the pleasure that can grow. It doesn't stop. It can grow. Whereas if you rely on the sensory one, you'll be totally suffering, and that's why we suffer so badly on the planet. Someone else. So all this is really quite subtle. You can see because all this happens at a million miles an hour. And we don't do any analysis, We do brain analysis, but we're not just talking that here. We're talking mental analysis. Your own mind, analyzing your own mind. A pretty incredible system, I have to say, I think. Coming from genius Indians well before the Buddha, I tell you, they're brilliant. So the key one is to distinguish between, I've got these negative states of mind, the unhappy ones, the ones that are painful in their nature, and such that we follow them, they continue to sow negative seeds and they will grow more attachment, more anger. You can never get less angry by being angry, It just only creates more anger. It's the most direct result. But the long-term karmic results are the hard ones for us, but these are the ones as well. The long-term results, sowing negative seeds in your mind. Let's look at karma again, go back to junior school. So the key, like I said before, there's various factors that have to be involved in any action we do that's called a complete action. Let me explain. A complete action, let's say a virtuous one of non-killing, which is the main seed that was triggered at the time of our past death, as the process started, even before we stopped breathing. Already, the virtuous karmic seed in our own bank vault from the past of non-killing was triggered, which already was programming our mind to go to this present mother's human womb once we died and left the body and, waited for her to hop into bed with daddy a few weeks later. So in order to have one of those delicious, rich karmic seeds in our mind called a complete karma, there have to be, like I said before, 4 things in place. Let's look at this in more detail. In order to create the virtuous karma of non-killing, like I said, without vows, there's got to be 4 things. 1, a living being, that mouse in the kitchen, okay? A living being is there. 2, the mind involved in that action. There's more to this, but it's just keeping it simple. There are 2 things there. 2A is intention. I must not kill the mouse. Got to be very conscious. I will not kill the mouse. And that's neither good nor bad. What makes it virtuous is the second part, 2B, and that's the motivation. Okay? So intention not meaning motivation, but bare bones volition, which is the very meaning of the word karma, mental action. It's the starting point of everything we ever do, and that's in the 3rd category. It's neither virtuous nor non-virtuous. You need intention. I will kill that person. You need intention. I will eat an ice cream. That's neither negative nor positive. What makes it negative or positive is the motivation that drives it. Okay, so 1B is intention. I will not kill them out. 2 is motivation. In this case, compassion. 3, you do the action. 4, the result, a happy mouse. Simply. That's a complete action of non-killing. So one of those drops into your main bank vault, and that type of seed is what we need bucket loads of in order to make sure one of them is triggered at the time of our death, just to ensure we get another decent human body. Now, 7 billion people have got one of those. Now look at the difference. Look at the difference.
So the
There's-
sorry.
Okay, so far clear?
The motivation is
Go.
then not to inflict suffering.
No, the motivation, compassion. You don't want to hurt. Yeah,
Don't.
I will not kill. Why not, Robina? Because I don't want it to suffer. That's compassion.
Right.
That's the best motivation. So the key point there is what I'm getting. Let's go, before I go too further, I'll go back to this one. The motivation for why we think or say or do something. The motivation that drives what we say or think or do is the main factor that determines the character of the action we do. Meaning whether it's negative or positive, meaning whether it drops a negative seed or a positive seed in the mind, meaning whether that seed will ripen as suffering or happiness. Can you hear the logic? And the main thing is the motivation. Let me explain this. It's quite shocking, but it's really powerful. Let's say, an action of killing. So there's Bob. He's got a mouse in his kitchen, and Jackie's got a mouse in her kitchen, and I've got a mouse in mine. Okay, so Bob's mouse we've all got a mouth, we've all got a mouth. So he sees the mouth, and then his next one is the mind. Intention, oh, I mustn't hurt the mouse, mustn't kill the mouse. Motivation, compassion. 3, he saves the mouse. 4, happy mouse. That's a complete virtuous action. A complete virtuous action. 1, it will bring the result of a human body at least. 2, it'll bring the result of, well, no, if it's done in vows. Yeah, if it's done in vows, it's much more powerful, and it will also bring the result of waking up next life with no thought to kill. It'll also ripen, as if you wake up next life, you won't get killed or die young. And the third one is you have a really delicious, fat, healthy body, and you won't get sick. They're the 3 other results. The 4 results of non-killing: human body, no thought to kill, won't get killed or die young, and happy, healthy body, you can eat what you like. They're the 4 karmic results of non-killing. And if Bob's living in a vow of non-killing, as well as having compassion, he will get those 4 results. Are you hearing me? Now, look at the human world. 7 billion human bodies, but look at the number of humans who have a tendency to kill. Can you see? Most humans kill, don't they? Not being rude. Most humans kill, and even with respect, most religions say it's okay to kill some beings, don't they? Do you understand my point? And so why? What's everything Bob and them? They didn't live in a vow. I want to use the example. This boy, always the same example. If you've heard it 57 times, I'm sorry, but I can't think of a better one. This fisherman, this mother came to Kopan one time, and she'd just been to Lama's over teaching. She came to me in tears because her boy, who'd been a fisherman all his life, since his little boy, he died 5 years before, and she was getting over the grief of his death, and suddenly she's hearing about the lower realms, for God's sake, and killing karma and all his business. So she's devastated. And she said, because he died 5 years before, and he'd been a fisherman all his life. He says he's a little boy. It's so interesting, this one. He's a little boy. Anyway, I'll say more details later, but this is the story. So she said, where's he being reborn? She never thought of karma. She just thought he died doing what he loved, killing fish. But he died scuba diving. So I said, well, I don't know where he's been born, darling, but go to see Geshe Control, this amazing yogi. He's very direct. Normally these lamas don't tell you what they see. And remember, clairvoyance is natural for them. They get that early on their path, When you get single point of concentration, you get clairvoyance. This is natural. You see tremendous clarity, past, future, karma of beings. So she went to see him, and she mentioned his name, and she said, where's he been reborn? And he said, look sadly, and he said, first he was born in the animal realms, and now he is in the hell realm. And she said, oh no, what'll I do for him? And he laughed sadly, and he said, what do you mean for him? He said, for everybody. She is not a Buddhist. I met her years later. She said it was very moving for her to hear that. It's amazing, isn't it? So what's that mean? This is the point. There he is. He gets a human body. At the time of his death, before that, virtuous karmic seed of non-killing had ripened, but it hadn't been practiced probably in the context of vows. So he gets a human body, a really nice human mummy in California. He has very nice intentions. He was a very generous boy and loving and kind, but he had in those habits a tendency to kill. He hadn't purified all aspects of his killing, which is what vows do. Third, he died young, which is the experience similar to the cause of killing. And fourth, environmental, he probably had good karma there. So that's the human realm. Look at the human realm. People have a human body, but most have a tendency to kill. Many get killed, and many have terrible. Look at environmental suffering. COVID's environmental suffering for millions of humans. Look at Los Angeles. That's collective karma of those thousands of people from past killing in countless lives ago. But suddenly it just swoops in because you hadn't purified it. So this is why vows are so powerful. By living in vows, so Bob's action of non-killing in the framework of non-killing vow, it purifies all 4 aspects of non-killing, of killing. So next life, even this life he'll already be better, but next life he will get a human body. He'll wake up with no thought to kill. He will wake up with, and he won't even have a meeting, won't even have to meet a situation in which he's needed to kill. And he will have no one kill him, and no one or harm him or kill him or die young. And he'll live to a ripe old age, and his body will be fat and healthy, and he'll eat the rubbish food, and it won't matter. Are you hearing me? So look at the humans with environmental suffering, with sickness. I read recently in the New York Times, 70 million Americans live in constant pain. More than that, this is unbearable. That's called sickness. That's the result of killing. It's not being mean. It's just so tragic, The third kind of karma experience similar to the cause of killing is you die young or get killed. Look at the people killed all the time. Look at the people who die young. Look at fetuses. I don't think we do that research. I think we would find, if we did our research, that more people, like the little one who came to my womb when I was 23, die even before they're born, meaning abortions and miscarriages. That's millions of humans who get the karma to be a human, but their karma to be killed is so strong they die even before they're born. Then the babies who die, the 3-year-olds who die, the happy people who die, the healthy people who die. Look at the world, because we haven't lived in vows. But this fisherman's a great example. It's heartbreaking. I'll discuss the 12 links. It's very fascinating. Okay.
Can you discuss a little more? Again, I'm not familiar with the living in vows. Yeah, I know you discussed
vows,
it earlier,
yeah.
but
I'll go into
maybe you
it.
can
I will go into it. I will go into it. Definitely. I will. I'll do that. I'll thank you, Bob. It's a very helpful question. I will go. I will do it. Let me tell the story.
Yeah.
First. So there's 2 examples. There's one boy. This is a friend of mine. And I'll do it now. Then I'll discuss the fisherman because it's very tragic. It's kind of like a very fascinating analysis, you know. So there's 2 kids. There's this fisherman boy, and there's another friend of mine, my friend Dei Chen, who has a boy when he was a little boy. He's now a grown-up man. You know. She said he's a Buddhist. He was a Buddhist, and she said when he was 3, and she's taking the lice out of his head, and he's crying in compassion for the lice. Mummy, mummy, don't hurt them. It's their home. He did everything he could to stop her harming the lice in his own head. So she hadn't taught him that. Well, the fisherman, she hadn't taught him fishing, but as soon as he went fishing, okay, the first boy, you could argue, this is the one about Bob, vows, you could argue he's got and he's never killed anything in this life. He just naturally never had the thought to kill. It just didn't arise in his mind. So we look at the karmic causes of that, because he must have lived, he lived in vows of not killing. So why vows? So Bob's question, I have to answer it. Why vows are so strong? Because I tried to say before, when you decide, Bob, to do something, would you agree it's much more powerful than merely doing it occasionally?
absolutely.
So that's the power of vows. It's much more powerful psychologically for your mind. So living in vows, you vowed every day, I will never kill. And every day you purify your killing and you again vow, I will never kill. So it's like doing push-ups. You make it stronger and stronger and stronger and conscious in your mind every day. You don't just take a vow and then forget about it. It's in there guiding your mind. So it's powerful psychologically. Do you understand me? So now you look at the fisherman example. This little boy, he got a beautiful human mother, he got a lovely human life, and he was generous and blah, blah, blah. But the moment he went fishing, he fell in love with fishing. So look at the 12 links. There he is. The first thing to do is you have to make contact. Number 6 is contact. He makes contact with an event called fishing. Next millisecond, the 7th link is, in his case, intense pleasure. Pleasant feelings is triggered. The next millisecond, intense pleasure is triggered. Why? And I checked this with the answer Michelle. He said it's true. The extent of that pleasure in his case is equal to the extent of his past habit from killing. Can you hear that? The extent of his, and that's mental pleasure, not even sensory. That's mental pleasure that was triggered the moment he saw fishing. He doesn't know why. You understand? And that equals the intensity of his past habit of killing programmed in his mind because he hadn't lived in vows. So he got a human body. He'd been in the lower realms in the past. He exhausted that karma only, finished the negative karma, gets a new human body like a miracle, but he hasn't lived in vows, so he hasn't purified the tendency to kill, the main one. So he wakes up in this life, and the extent of his past killing karma equals the extent of the pleasure. And of course, we all want pleasure. The next millisecond after pleasure, this 8th link is intense attachment. So attachment kicks in and paints a divine picture of this scenario called fishing. And he is set up to be, he's like won the lottery, hasn't he? Do you understand me? So we are such junkies that whatever triggers pleasure, we think it must be the right thing to do. And that's where, if with him it's killing fish, all his life, he's a nice man. But because the attachment was so intense, the pleasure was so delicious, he doesn't know why. He found his purpose in life, He defined himself as a fisherman. So it's like he vowed to kill. He defined himself as a fisherman. He spent his life fishing. All his schedule was based on being a fisherman. Everything was related to being a fisherman. That's like taking a vow to kill. So the pleasure this is very powerful. I remember reading one Australian guy, maybe if you used to read Time magazine 40 years ago, the arts writer was called Robert Hughes. And he's an Australian writer. I know him well. He's dead now, but he was totally addicted to fishing. He wrote lyrically about the first time he went trout fishing. He said it was like a cosmic experience. So basically, he's a torturer, but we don't mind fishing because we think it's not torture. But basically, he got bliss, real bliss. So that means equal to the extent of his past karma of killing, that equal the extent of his pleasure. My friend in death row in Kentucky, who thinks of torture all the time, that little person, that boy who jumps on little girls all day and never stops thinking, getting pleasure from it, that's the extent of the habit. That's the tragedy, you know. We have no control over it. It's so intense. So contact comes, pleasure rises in his case, and then attachment kicks in. So of course he's going to be a fisherman. Now, if he wanted to torture dogs, he would have been in trouble. Because the world doesn't approve of dogs being tortured, you know. Do you understand me? So he happily was a fisherman. No one thinks fishing is bad. No one sees the suffering of a fish. And that's the tragedy of actions driven by attachment, not even anger, that it blinds you from seeing the reality. So what he saw was this wonderful environment. He saw this beautiful, all the fish coming into his boat. He saw these creatures flapping their little bodies. They don't have voices, their little eyes, they're looking wide. They don't have a voice. They don't have legs. But he just sees flapping fish. Do you understand me? I'm not being rude. You watch those shows of people who go fishing, you know, and they're being the big in the ocean. They get the crabs, they get the lobsters. They don't see living beings at all. It's just habit from past karma. It's not criticizing. It's habit from past karma. Do you understand? It's incredible. It's unbearable. And then attachment makes it look delicious. You want to do it. You're attracted to it. You can't bear not to doing it. That's where there's, and our best thing is eating cake, for God's sake. We're attached to eating bloody cake. You understand me? We can't resist the cake, can we? It's not possible. Oh my God, I have to have the cake. That's attachment. The pleasure is triggered when you see it or think about it. The attachment kicks in, and it's painful not to have it, because we're going to have a panic attack if we don't get what attachment wants, isn't it? This is the tragedy of samsara. This is the Buddhist analysis. So this is the tragedy, because he hadn't purified all aspects by living in vows, which is conscious, intentional, in the front of your mind. So it purifies not only the main karma of getting a lower realm rebirth, it also purifies the habit, it purifies the experience, and it purifies the environmental karma. You understand what I'm saying now, Bob? Do you see the point now, Bob? So this is why Lama Zopa says, and the Buddha says, you can't get ahead without vows, you know.
What about the pleasure child abuse?
Sorry, darling.
The pleasure of child abuse.
Same
Being a
thing,
child.
same thing, darling. Any abuse, not just children. Anybody who gets angry and wants to harm people, even if they think they don't want to do it, the habit is so strong. So if a person, I think to the person, let's say, you know, I think what we would call psychotic. Let's say I remember this fellow years ago called BTK. Remember him in one state where they didn't have death row? Bind, torture, kill. For 35 years, he's a nice Christian man, lived with his wife, went to church every day, but he had this secret life because he's totally attached to torture. So he has a secret dungeon he's built, ready built for his own needs, you know. And he would kidnap people, always more than one. He would bind them. He would torture them. And he said in the court when he got caught, he had to confess everything. But that's what he got, what he called sexual pleasure. So I'll describe that in a minute, what that means. But he got intense pleasure. So we have pleasure, even the bit of pathetic pleasure we have from cake. It's irresistible. We can't stop, can we? The cake, we have to have it because attachment comes next. So attachment is making you crave to have that thing because you want that pleasure. You don't want the cake, you want the pleasure. You understand? So he had this pleasure, incredible, blissful pleasure from torturing people for 35 years. Can you imagine being born with that tendency? I mean, talk about suffering. Forget the compassion for the people, but look at that kind of mind, you know, for having done it before. Do you understand me? It's intense, isn't it?
But what's the relationship of the child that has been abused?
Well, he'd been harmed before. Honey child, that child was the pedophile 10 years before. We forget that. It's too hard for our mind. We see the ugly, disgusting, evil pedophile want to kill him. Well, guess what? He might have been a nice guy in other ways. He gets a human life next life, a little girl. What do you think's going to happen to him? We don't like to think that way. We want to see a little girl as innocent. We're all innocent in the sense that it's painful. But it's a very, I mean, this view is so kind of curious. That's why I like to talk about those Tibetan nuns. Got, I remember 2003, Richard Gere invited His Holiness in New York and also he decided to invite 20 former prisoners, all of whom had been done some kind of practice in prison, and he invited people like me too, because I was working with people in prison. It was a very moving day. All these 20 people, black, white, Puerto Rican, male, female, whole cross-section of Americans who'd done some kind of meditation. And they loved the day. They met His Holiness. They had a happy day. And then he also Richard Gere invited 2 young Tibetan nuns who'd been tortured and sexually abused in Tibet, right? So this is, I find, a really good explanation of this entire view, including compassion. Because, you see, you've got to realize in there, Tibet became Buddhist about 7th century. It's been in India for 1,200 years, before that, 2,000 years. It's amazing genius Hindu yogis and scholars and saints, right? So Padmasambhava went in about the 7th century, took the Dharma in his mind. He didn't need a library. It was in his mind. He brought it to Tibet, and then Buddhism started. So there she is in 1,200 years later. That's been in the bones of their culture for 1,200 years. In the same way that materialist view, scientific view, we just take as a given in our culture, that's what theirs is. It's been in India before that. 5,000, 4,000 years, this view of karma is totally the reality for those cultures. Do you understand? That's natural for them. So she's been brought up with it in their bones. And because they take it seriously, it's not some separate concept. It informs their lives. Meaning, this is the whole point now. These young women was very clear to the Americans, I would suggest. They weren't angry. They weren't kind of traumatized. Why? Because they know about karma. They apply it sincerely in their lives. In those years they're being tortured. They don't want to be tortured. They'd love to get out. But they have a method for interpreting it. They know why it's happening. They don't rage on and pull their hair out. Why is this happening to me? Because they don't have anger. They have the view of karma. So it's quite profound, the difference. So they manage to deal with it all, manage to work through this suffering. They finally get released. They're quiet. There's tears. And as one of them said, and of course, we had compassion for our torturers because we know we must have harmed them in the past, but the real one, and we know because they will suffer in the future. And that's the basis of compassion. It's kind of so, and it's based on karma. That's why this compassion wing is not enough without understanding karma. You get my point? It's sentimental compassion, and it's based on anger. Because we're determined to find the blame, who to blame for that little girl. We love having compassion for her, but we hate the pedophile. Do you understand? This is a very, very different view. I remember even as a little girl, I'm not trying to show off or anything, but my father didn't behave well with his daughters. But I remember always I could tell he suffered more than we did. I could tell. He was a good man in many ways. I could see that so clear to me. I love my father, But I could see he suffered. I could see that. It was clear to me. I could see that. So somehow I never hated him that much. I was very fortunate. You understand me? I was really fortunate to have that, Even though it was inappropriate, what he did was wrong. Totally wrong. There's no question. But I could see he was suffering. He couldn't control his own mind, It wasn't very brutal. He did wrong things. It was not appropriate. For me, it was clear. It was a little girl. It was always funny too, because there were 7 of us. 7 of us kids, and my mother and father would fight. He'd get drunk. He'd run out, and we'd all 8 of us would sit down and say the rosary for Daddy. We'd always say the rosary for Daddy. We'd all try to have compassion for him. But since then, some of my sisters hate my father and call him a pedophile. What to do? Okay. You understand? Yeah. So this compassion is not sentimental. It's not, oh, the poor thing can't help it. Put him in prison. Absolutely put people, but come out of compassion, not out of wish to harm. That's the difference, There's one of vows. You're clear about what I mean, Bob? How it's psychologically, it's much more powerful. It's in the front of your mind, Yes, darling.
I'm thinking about beef.
About what, darling?
When I go to eat meat,
Yeah. Okay.
I'm not thinking that I have the intention to kill,
No, I know exactly.
right? My motivation
right.
is to nourish myself.
That's right, exactly.
But the hunter or whoever's working in this meat factory
Sure.
has the intention to kill, but with the motivation of feeding people.
Or whatever. So go on. So the question. What is your question? And we'll
So
discuss
then
it.
where's the
Okay,
where
let's
does
look
the
at it.
vow come in?
Let's look at it, darling. Let's look at it. Okay. Let's look at it. It's way more subtle and more nuanced and more detailed than we tend to think, right?
Yeah.
Well, the first point for me is always interesting. We always only ever discuss this topic in terms of eating meat. But in reality, the topic is what's the karma of using animals' bodies and flesh for our benefit? It's more than just eating meat, isn't it? It's using silk, it's using leather for our shoes, it's using medicines that have killed out. So there's a whole, we know there's industries in our human culture that are based on the killing of animals. So that's the broader issue. Would you agree with that?
I think there's also a question about like outsourcing
No, wait,
the
please.
motivation.
No, wait, no, you're 17 steps ahead,
Okay.
one step at a time. Can you accept my first point?
Yeah.
Good, let's go from there. So the karma, what is the karma of utilizing for our benefit animals' bodies on who've been killed for our benefit? That's the point. Yeah, you agree with that point
Yeah.
in general? Okay, good. Let's look at that. But my thought is that always, because I think we're so attached to food that we make a big fuss about eating meat rather than having leather belts. Because maybe there are more animals killed for leather belts than food. I don't know. But we always go on about eating because I think we're so attached to eating food. I mean, I also think this might be controversial, but I always think sexual abuse is just abuse. It's just it happens to involve penises, usually penises, right? You agree?
Yes.
Ladies don't go around, sticking dildos into girls' vaginas. It's usually,
No.
excuse me being blunt, but it's usually involving men. I'm not being rude now. I've been a man before. So it's just violence, right? It's just violence. But as soon as it's sexual violence, we have complete panic attack because it somehow freaks us out 20 times more. Would you agree with that? It's really true, isn't it? So I think it's the same as because we're attached to sex, so much attachment and confusion about pleasure and guilt. And the same with food, we're so attached to food. I've never yet had a person ask the question in any other way than you asked it, which is about eating meat. You understand? And this is what I find interesting. So I'll give you an example. I know when I was years ago on Facebook, I put a picture of me in Leeds in the UK at this cheese shop, and I was buying kick-ass cheddar, right? So I put it on the thing, and all these fundamentalist vegans, I'm sorry, the fundamentalists who go around lecturing everybody, how dare a Buddhist not eat cheese, So I didn't want to be political. So I'd always wondered how many little bugs killed on the road when you drive cars, right? So I did the research, and sure enough, some Dutch bloke has done the research, and it's like trillion of wee bugs are slaughtered just on the number plate. You understand? Per car, per kilometre, whatever. So I put that story on, and the guy said, "Oh, you can't help that. That's just collateral damage." So in other words, if billions of creatures are slaughtered, but you don't eat them, it doesn't matter. But as soon as you put the bugs in your mouth, you're a monster. That's a bit irrational. We're going to cover all the points, but you see my point. It's irrational. It's hysterical. And even more direct, one Australian scientist got fed up with all the fundamentalist vegans and vegetarians criticizing the meat industry. He said, for God's sake, he gave an example of this wheat field near Melbourne, where in the off season, all these millions of little field mice would gather. He said they were so cute. They sing love songs to each other. He had photos of them. And guess what they have to do before they plant the new wheat? Slaughter the field mice. He didn't care about that either. He said, oh, they can't help that. But he imagined if we slaughtered them for food. Are you hearing my point, people? It's completely irrational. It really shows how absurd we are, when we get so narrow about the eating of it. Do you understand my point, people? Or you got an argument with me?
No.
So,
You see my, go on.
Robert, I
What?
mean, it's the motivation there. They're
No, I'm not
killing
touching. What do you mean by motivation? For which? Which
they're
one?
killing the field mice
Yeah.
so that they can grow the wheat.
Yeah, excuse me. Wait a minute. I'm very sorry. Excuse me. No, what's the motivation there? Attachment. The motivation for eating food, attachment. We call it, to feed people. Don't be ridiculous. It's attachment to getting what we want. So we have aversion. We slaughter millions of creatures with not even noticing we're doing it because we want to grow wheat there. That's called attachment, sweetheart. That's not virtue. That's a joke. No way on the planet is that virtue. It's called attachment. It's called aversion and attachment. Well, my point is, you're killing the mice to get wheat. Well, you kill the cow to eat it. What's the difference? There's no difference. It's still
Motivation.
that's what it's no different motivation. It's identical. Both. Why do you slaughter the mice? Get wheat. Why do you slaughter the cow? To get their flesh. What's the difference? They're both dead. And why? Because you want to get something for you. What else is it? Give me a reason. Come on. It's not.
Right.
Well, I know, but the motivation is the same. Can't you see that?
Well,
Not really.
Isn't it better to?
Just a minute. Wait. No better. No comparison. What is the difference? You're attached to getting wheat, so you kill mice. You're attached to eating flesh, so you kill cows. Where is the difference in motivation?
Because you're killing the cow purposely,
And you're killing the mice purposely.
there's a different result.
No, there's not. There's two dead creatures. There's two. Wait, stop. Wait. There are two dead creatures. Okay, two humans. One of me wants to eat flesh, and one wants to get you out of the way because you're sitting in my garden. You both are dead. Attachment is the same motivation. One result is I want to grow veggies where you're sitting. The other one is I want to eat her body. What's the difference? It's attachment to get what I want. It's attachment
I don't
to
see
get.
it as attachment.
I know you don't. Well, how about thinking
Like,
about it?
I-
How about thinking about it? Why would you kill millions of beings without even blinking an eye? If they were your,
Because you
excuse me,
wanna
honey,
feed
if they were
billions.
your pussycats, excuse me, you'd have a very different view. Do you know why? Because you're attached to your pussycat. Think about it, please.
What
Go on,
about
your point,
the-
John. What's your, Dave, this man, what's
Well,
your
I
point?
think what she's trying to say is like when
I
you-
don't want to know you, I don't want your interpretation of what she said. I want to know what you said. If you got a different view, then
like
don't.
if you buy a like if you eat a piece of bread like with the wheat stuff, like you're
I'm not
Um,
discussing that. I'm not discussing that. I'm looking at the actual action that motivates a decision to kill a cow or to kill a mouse. That's what I'm looking at. The action is the mouse there, there's a cow there. First point. Second point, motivation, intention. I will kill the rat. I will kill the mouse. Same. Motivation, attachment to get wheat. This one, attachment to get flesh. Third, you do the action. Fourth, a dead mouse or a dead cow. It's identical.
What about the cockroach?
What about the cockroach? Same thing, identical, same thing. You don't like cockroach, you're attached to getting cockroach free. You have aversion to the cockroach. So that's aversion that's even worse than attachment. Yeah.
So
Wait, does it? Yeah, go. Say.
how do you justify eating the meat?
Well, this is the beginning of the discussion. This is the beginning of our discussion. Let's just go. I'm trying to unpack it step by step, okay? What's your point?
I would ask, what is the solution?
Okay. Well, okay, that's another whole discussion. Solutions. If we look at the scenario, the Buddhist view and the Hindu view too, and the Jains at the time, this is the nature of samsara, such that we've created so much negative karma over countless eons that we live in a world that is completely built upon suffering. It is fraught with suffering. The karma of sentient beings is so intense that they create the cause from past killing to be killed now. And then we continue the karma by killing them or whatever, or eating them or whatever, or killing them. And so it perpetuates. So it's the unbearable suffering of samsara. Well, you can't make it all better, but all you can do is start with yourself. Give up harming others as best you can, give up delusions, and try to practice virtue. That's the only solution. There's no other way. You can try and work on the industry. I mean, people are trying to work on the industry of vegetarianism and veganism, but it doesn't mean other beings stop suffering. We get so upset that they are stopping suffering. I mean, your point is so clear, you just can't see it's the same. Because we think, oh, you're not eating. As soon as you're not eating it, you think it's different. It's so bizarre that, you know.
What
What's
about
your point?
using like insecticide?
Okay, all these things, we're going into it all.
All
We're trying to look at the big picture. The big picture is samsara is so unbearable that even this whole universe, this gross physical world we live in, you could argue that as wherever there are the four elements, that's a conducive environment for sentient beings to live. So our bodies are a walking zoo. Under here is a walking zoo. Our mouth is a total ecosystem. This is the suffering of samsara. So the long-term view, the Hindu view, and the Buddhist one is get the hell out of it by changing yourself, giving up harming. At least so you start by deciding, I'm not going to harm any sentient being. You start by living in vows. Every day you purify your vow to kill. You purify getting killed. At least you can protect yourself from all of that. Then you, in general, try to intend not to harm any sentient being. So, if you can, where?
How does Buddhism look at taking a cell from
Don't do what?
taking a cell from cow and
Taking a what?
growing meat from a cell?
Oh, you sure? That's good. Good idea. Good on you. That'll all come. Good. I think it's a great idea. So okay. What we can do individually? I try to stop harming sentient beings. So I take vows. I try to not kill directly, and killing means in object, intention, motivation, action, result. That's a complete action of killing. So now a next heavy action would be if, oh, I don't want to look at dirty old smelly chicken. So can you please kill my chicken for me? That's even worse because you're getting someone else to kill the chicken for you because you have aversion, you know? So every single tiny action of each individual person is going to be different. But in general, the intention has to be there, the motivation has to be there, the living creature has to be there. That's the complete action of killing. So then, okay, there's a million variations. So you go to someone's lunch, they offer you a lamb chop. Well, you know, I remember one time one Tibetan Lama brought his attendant to have lunch with one of the students. The student didn't know what they ate, so she offered meat. Well, the disciple, the attendant said, "Oh, I don't eat meat." And the Lama said, "You eat that meat." Because the woman had offered it. It was a gift. You know, vegetarians and vegans, I'm sorry to be so fanatic. Oh, I don't want to touch that. It's got meat in it. It's not going to poison you. If a person gives you a gift, in my opinion, you eat the damn thing. But we're so fanatic about everything, in my opinion. It's not saying my opinion. If you get sick, that's different, you know. I mean, there's a million variations of it. The other thing is, one thing, for example, we think meat, if you stop the demand, then the killing will stop. But when we realize that the intensity of the karma of beings who killed in the past is to be born as creatures to get fished or slaughtered in the slaughterhouses. That's the particular karma they have. So I'm quite sure if we all stop eating chickens, all those same minds will go get born as fish. Those same minds will go get born as bulls, you know, because the karma is there. Or even the one of demand. I remember in Maine one year, these 10 times more lobsters turned up in the waters of Maine. No one ordered them. So of course the fishermen were happy. But then it deflated the price, and they all lost their business, and the Maine government had to spend millions of dollars on bloody marketing these silly old lobsters, you know. So then nobody invited the lobsters. Karma ripened and too many lobsters came. So it's due to the karma of sentient beings to be born as animals, karma of sentient beings to kill. There's so many more things involved in it. So all we can do individually, okay, you can be political if you like, go and try and change the world. Meanwhile, at least purify your own karma, you know. I said, okay, what about eating meat? It depends on the person. You know, if you let's say, you know, I mean, a million variations. One of my sisters never liked eating meat. She just saw cows. How can I eat it? I was she was also compassionate, but her health was terrible, so she had to eat meat sometimes. How can you say, you know, that's negative? Another person, would you know, if they're attached to eating meat, be attached to eating meat, it's good practice not to eat it for your own sake. I mean, there's so many variations of it, and we can do our best. If you are going to eat meat, at least as Lama Zopa says, even a bone that's 1,000 years old, because of the karmic connection between that bone and the life it used to be, wherever that consciousness is now, by saying a mantra, you bless your breath, you blow on the bone, the consciousness whose body it was 1,000 years ago will get the benefit. So if you're going to eat meat, say mantra and bless the creature. So make prayers that you meet that creature and benefit in the future. There's so many ways we can look at the actions. Sometimes you wouldn't do it if it's too close to the killing. Sometimes you would. You've got to be more nuanced about it and always do your best to have a good motivation and to be as conscious as possible, you know, and to be aware of suffering. A few things there. What do you think, John? You asked me the question. Is that helpful information?
Yes.
Good, sweetheart. Any more questions on that topic? You want some more things? You still determined it's the same, not the same. So, in other words, okay, let me put it this way. If you are going to get killed for your flesh or killed because people like killing you, you don't really care, do you? You're going to suffer badly, aren't you? Would you agree you suffer badly no matter what?
Yeah.
Okay. There you go, baby. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much.
End of discussion. Come on. What else? What do you think? What do you think? You.
What do I think
How about this? Any more points about
about
you have
like
to say?
meat
What, sweetheart?
and like about food?
This
ethics?
topic, for example, any particular points as you just said something before, so do you have anything to say? I'm just curious. No questions?
Um,
Don't have to.
are you a vegetarian or a vegan?
That's not your business. I'm never going to ask people what they eat. They put in their mouth, or in fact, where they put their sex organs. I think it's very rude. It's not your business. I won't tell you about my sex life, and I won't tell you about my eating life. Well, I will tell you I don't have sex. That's okay.
Fair enough.
I think because we're attached to sex and attached to food, we define ourselves in terms of being a homosexual or a lesbian or a vegetarian. I think it's very rude. None of anybody's business, in my opinion. You understand what I'm saying? That's my suggestion, my thought.
Yeah.
Does that make sense? That's my opinion. Because we're attached to sex and attached to food. We use it as definitions. It's very weird, actually. Yeah.
I want to share a story. Like when my son was like 6 or 7,
Yeah.
I didn't know anything about Buddhism at that point, and I never thought about like, oh, I'm gonna send you to fishing camp for the summer, like a weekend fishing camp.
Okay, so then,
And so he came back destroyed, crying. He was in shock.
because,
And he said that I saw the most horrible healing. I don't know how people can do that.
oh, that's interesting, isn't it? So what was your deduction from that?
And I was like, I'm so sorry. I send you
That's right.
so unconscious that
That's
I'm
right,
sending
exactly.
you to a situation.
So what so what's your analysis of your boy's response to it? What do you think is the?
I think he's a pure Buddhist. And
Well, I mean,
so,
he must have he must
Yeah.
have the view of non-killing in the past, such that he
Yes.
saw suffering instead of just being happy about it. That's
yes.
the shows the karmic impact.
And he
doesn't it?
stopped going, of course. He didn't return and never ever touch one thing,
Okay,
fishing
there
ever,
you go. So
ever.
it shows the karmic impact.
But I think for me, it was like the unconsciousness of, oh, that's like nothing, like a fishing camp or
right.
things that you expose people or myself or my kids to things that
That's right.
then it's much more like profound
I understand.
on
I understand.
the
Darling. Yeah, I understand.
effect, no?
I understand. Darling. Any questions more? We're trying to get forward. 15 minutes. Time to go. Yes, darling. Yes, sweetheart. Yes, yes, yes. Talk to me.
About killing,
Yeah,
using insecticides to get rid of roaches that aren't there.
I understand. No, to prevent them, you mean?
I do that.
Yeah.
Well, see, that's the thing. Okay. First of all, we know we don't like particularly the roaches. We know that. You're on the point. We mightn't like the fleas and all those creatures who eat our house and everything. It's true, we don't. So at least with some compassion, trying to get this idea. No, first of all, the first one is the hardest one. It's the compassion for ourselves in thinking, what is the karmic seeds I'm planting in my mind, killing creatures? That should be the first one. But often that's hard for us, but we get the compassion one sometimes is easier, you understand, although it shouldn't be more difficult. So the thing is, if you do want your house, okay, I live in a place in New York City where I know that the money I pay to the building pays for the slaughtering of the rats and the cockroaches. Now, so like paying your taxes that use guns to murder people, isn't it? For wars. You can't make it stop. You can't say to Mr. Trump, please don't use them. I'm not going to pay you taxes. You can't do that. So what am I going to do? I'm living in the house, and in a way, I'm happy they're not coming, but I know they've been slaughtered with my money. So I have special pujas done at Kopan. I spend $20 every month for special pujas for the cockroaches and the rats that my money is killing. So at least I can kind of purify some karmic connection I have with these creatures to attempt to benefit them in the future. That's all I can do. Otherwise, I leave the house, So we do what we can. If you can use things, I mean, I think we're very clever these days. We can find lots of methods of preventing creatures from coming. So if we can try and do that, do the best we can, But I think the main thing is to be as intentional and try not to get off the hook. Oh, it's not my fault. I can't help it. Be as conscious as we can, knowing that just by existing, we are killing creatures all the time. Just kind of get a good perspective and do with what we can. And this is where this is where I think it's interesting with living in vows. Okay, let me look at this one. This is an interesting point, this one. Okay. So there's 4 ways that our karma ripens. One is a type of rebirth. One is the tendency to keep doing it. One is having it done to you. It's good or bad, right? And one is environmental. So now, this is where the 4 opponent powers, they call the 4 steps in the purification. I haven't been through it, have I? I'll do it now. Yeah, I did. The first one is regret. That's right. So regret, meaning I regret having killed in the past because I don't want the future suffering result. That regret specifically purifies the type of karma called experiences similar to the cause, which is where you meet the creatures who are going to harm you back. So if you have that very strong, you will never need to even think about killing creatures because by regretting, you purify meeting them. You understand? So if you do regretting every day, don't be surprised they won't come. Most powerful way to make them go away. Second, the compassion, the second step, that purifies environmental karma, the way the physical world impacts upon you. Third, doing the actual practice purifies the lower realm suffering. And fourth, obviously, the vow never to kill again purifies the tendency to kill. So if you do all 4 of these steps, they purify all 4 ways that karma ripens. So if you have those 4, you will never meet creatures you're forced to kill. You will never need to kill them or want to kill them. They won't harm you, and you'll have a nice environment. So this is the most powerful long-term approach. You understand? In our hands, You understand? Good. What else, people? I started talking about attachment. I went back to karma again. That's okay. So motivation. Okay, let's look more at motivation. That was the one I was trying to get to. Okay, so back to the mice. Jackie's got a mouse, Bob's got a mouse, and I've got a mouse. Let's now look at the three scenarios and look at the karma. So Bob has the classical, the virtuous one. Mouse, I will not kill, compassion. He does the action, mouse exists. It's a perfect action. That's virtue. Let's say Jackie, this is killing karma. So he will not do it. He's got pure motivation, he has intention, he doesn't do the action. Jackie has a mouse, the same, but her mind's not involved. She doesn't see the mouse, so there can't be intention not to kill it. Or to kill it. There can't be intention. No, this is killing karma. He's a naughty boy. And he kills the mouse. Let's put it this way. Intention to kill, I will kill. Motivation, attachment or anger, he does the action, dead mouse. That's a complete action of killing that Bob has just created. Jackie has the same mouse, but she has no intention because she doesn't see it. So therefore there can't be a motivation, can there? You see my point? The mind is not involved in any way. She stands on the mouse, the third one, and the mouse dies. She never knows she killed the mouse. Zero negative karma. It's obvious, which means you don't care. It's not that you don't not care. Wait, let me finish. But you have to become intentional and not just slumber through life and harm and not care. You become conscious. But if the mind isn't involved, how can there be karmic imprints on your mind? Because the mind is what retains karmic imprints. You see my point? Now, my mouse, let's say I have a mouse too, and intention is, I must kill the mouse. Why? Because I have compassion. And this is why we kill our pets. We do this for our pets, right? We're very common. It's the commonest one we do. Because my mouse is suffering. You understand my point? I must kill it. I don't want it to suffer. So you say my motivation is compassion. Then I do it, I kill it, and the dead mouse. Well, you could argue if my intention can be sincere, my motivation can be sincere compassion. I really can't. The suffering is so bad. You could argue I not even create much negative, but I create virtue. But this is where compassion is not enough. You've got to have wisdom. This is a crucial one for our pets, I tell you. And let's look at this one. So for the two things going on, one is the karma of the mouse. You understand my point? And one is the karma for me. So from my side, I'm fine. You get my point? But what about the poor mouse? And analyze, why did I do the action? It was for the sake of the mouse, wasn't it? But I never bothered looking at what will happen to the mouse once I kill it, because we don't think that in our culture. We think the mouse is dead, the suffering is over. But if we take the Buddhist view, that mouse's mind will continue to another life. Do you understand my point? And then more crucially, at the time it dies, depending on what's in its mind, when I kill it, determines the karma that will be triggered and determines its future birth. Well, who has that kind of wisdom? I'm sorry, we don't have it. So don't play Russian roulette with your mouse, okay? It's a bit like I've got a terrible headache, you understand? And you have incredible compassion. Oh, Robina, I've got a pill here, please take it. But you don't know whether it's cyanide or aspirin. Then I die an agonizing death. Oh, I meant well, Robina. Thanks a lot. Keep your pill to yourself. So if you don't have wisdom that sees the mind of the mouse, but you have confidence the karma is positive, kindly back off and do what you can to help the mouse, give it a pill, protect it from suffering, do prayers for it, do everything you can to help it die peacefully. Because we don't have the wisdom. This is really a huge point, and it's shocking for us in the West, you know.
I have a question.
Good.
If, let's say I'm suffering and I want to end, and I'm ending my
That's
life.
right, exactly. Same argument. It's the same. It's the same, you know. If you have the confidence, meaning you know your mind, and you have to be really advanced to have this wisdom. You've got to be clairvoyant, basically, or you've got to have such confidence in your practice that you can say with certainty that when you'll decide to take a pill or get me to kill you, you have to have such certainty that your mind will be so stable that you won't freak out, you won't have ignorance, and that you have enough certainty that a virtuous karmic seed will be triggered at that time. That's a lot of wisdom, darling. It's playing Russian roulette. It sounds theoretically nice, which is why all the world these days, so many people, I mean, the laws in so many countries now are seeing it as a very noble thing, and it sounds noble, but we don't factor in this whole business of knowing what's going on in future life. You see, we don't factor it in at all. If there's no future life, please kill yourself now. It doesn't matter. I'm really serious. It doesn't matter. but this is the view here. If there is future life and what rises in your mind at that time, you know, you can do your best. I mean, this is where so many times, like a discussion, like these days, for example, all the machines we have in the medical profession keep people alive for 30 years. I mean, as His Holiness, I asked the Lama, Dalai Lama and the other lamas, they said it's ridiculous. Use the money for something better. So then if you have that the dilemma we've created of keeping a person alive, and you do what you can, you do many prayers and practices at the time you take the thing off, and you can best you can do, you know. So we created this dilemmas for us, ourselves, in our system. Do you understand? So it's wisdom that we really don't have. And I think the other thing I think we have to look at, we don't think about this, is we do have compassion for our pet that's dying, but we have so much attachment and fear of their suffering. We have fear of their suffering. So the number of times I've seen with people who really have struggled to think about not killing them, like one friend, her doggy, the vet said you should kill it, or they put polite words, you know, put it to sleep or something. And she really didn't want to. And she said the dog was anxious and worried. So she just simply, I said, well, why don't you just give it a try? She wanted advice. So I got her the video of Lama Zopa singing the Medicine Buddha. See, this is one of the things that's very profound. When you, at the time of death, as you're dying or very sick, your mind gets very subtle. And your mind is much more susceptible to things like mantra and sound. It can be very blissful. It can make your mind very peaceful. Do you understand? And this dog, she said, immediately he calmed down. He started to eat his dinner. He's calm. And in a few days, he died peacefully. I mean, I've heard so many, even of humans, of so many stories like this, you know. I remember one time, that's the big one about, there's a lot about this in Lama Zopa's book. When you're going, if you're sick and dying, your mind is moving away from the sensory to the more subtle level of your mental. So you're much more sensitive. You can even become clairvoyant. You can feel things coming. You understand that? I remember one, anyway, I remember this time that a friend of mine was in a hospital in Sydney. She was in a deep coma. And she wasn't a Buddhist, but she knew these lamas. She knew Sakya Trinzen and Dongsa Khyentse Rinpoche. So I'd asked their students, please pray for Judy. I'd go visit her at night in the hospital. I'd go late because you could drive fast at night. You know, it's 50 kilometers away. So I asked the husband to get them to give me permission to come in to say that I was her spiritual mentor or something, and I was a Buddhist nun. When I got there in the ER, you know, she was out of her brain, all these, you know, the wires in her head, and they were worried. They said, please don't ring bells. I promised I wouldn't ring bells. So anyway, I'd just sit there and I'd do prayers in her ear, right? And she was out of it completely. But then every now and again, I'd say, Judy, His Holiness Sakya Trinzen praying for you. Judy, Dongsa Khyentse Rinpoche is praying for you. So weeks later, she came out of a coma, all perky and happy. And she told me the only thing she remembered was exactly those words. She said she didn't know who it was me. There was this lady, a blue lady coming through the window, and it was this husky voice. She said that. And they were the exact words. Yeah, you can't make that up, okay?
No.
Yeah, you really can't. And this is where, because the mind, when it's more subtle, sound is more subtle, right? Than actions. Sound. And you can bless people, and it can bring them a lot of bliss and joy, and it can even bring the holy beings there, for animals as well, you know. It's very beneficial. You can really do that. So, you know, do you understand? So, and that's why protect the animal, keep it out of, especially the animal, especially doggies. Doggies are so attached to their people. If you make it feel safe, it's going to feel very peaceful and just so happy that you're there. That'll help even put a karmic imprint in their mind to get a human body, you know. There's many ways we can do to really help them and not be so fearful. I think so. Time to go home. Any more questions? No, no more questions. Yes, Rita. Where? Yes, darling. Go.
Would you say something about living in vows?
Living in vows.
Yeah, you said that's very important. You know, that's.
Were you here this morning?
I'm sorry.
No, don't worry. So we talked about it then. But no, don't worry, sweetheart. That's good. Okay, I'll tell the main reason. So we need to create lots of virtuous karma. What that means is it must be intentional. Like I just said before with Jackie, she did kill an animal, but there's no intention and no motivation. So there's no karma. You see that point? So it's got to be intentional. So we need to do bucket loads of non-killing, non-stealing, non-lying alone. Just these, not even doing good things, but refraining from doing bad. It's not just a passive thing. It's proactive. It's intentional. So how often in a day will you meet a mouse and then think, I mustn't kill it, and then have compassion, and then refrain from killing? It's not often, is it? You get my point. But if you have a vow not to kill, 24 hours a day, you have this very powerful decision in your mind. you're creating virtuous karma of non-killing 24 hours a day, blessing your mind and purifying your mind. Because it's much more powerful for your mind. It's in the front of your mind, you know. Just like the fisherman, it's obvious that a fisherman, he defined himself as a fisherman, like he vowed to kill. That's more powerful than occasionally killing. You get my point? He decided he would kill. In advance, he defined himself as a fish killer. Not being mean. That's way more powerful than occasionally killing fish. The same with virtue. You get my point? You understand? That's the point. Time to go home.
We tired you out.
I always think when I got older, I'd stop shouting, but I haven't.
You mean you haven't gotten older?
I mustn't have got, there you go.
Never.
Good logical deduction. I'm Peter Pan. Okay, people. So we think, actually, what I'm going to do is send to Rebecca. Where's
Yes,
Rebecca?
and Nana has the prayer that you sent to Don.
I beg your pardon?
He's good.
What happened?
Another's not here today.
Sorry, what?
Oh, sorry, you sent them to Don.
I sent you PDFs already.
No.
What? Oh, I didn't. I probably, okay, what I'll do is I'll send Don phone version and tablet version of teachings on all these topics, details of all these topics, okay? Tomorrow we'll do more of the compassion side. I'll send you all teachings on all of these things as PDFs. One that's formatted for your phone, easy to read, and one formatted for your tablet. I'll send those to Don, who can make sure he sends it to everybody or something. Do you understand?
Yeah.
All the stuff I've talked about so far. I mean, it was 15 years ago, so I'll probably say things different now, but it's the same stuff. And some teachings of Lama Yeshe and Lama Zopa as well. Okay. So we just finished, people. Where's the people on Zoom? Here they are. We finish our time together. Everybody's there. Who's that one? Can't see it. There's Jane in Hawaii. There's Mary, and that's the people. There you are. All these people, look at that. So here we finish our session together. All these seeds. So think about it. As many moments as we have been together is as many seeds we've planted. How amazing. You know? How delicious. We've just, you know, grown millions of virtuous karmic seeds in our mind. So may we nourish them from our attempts to practice from this moment forward. So they do ripen in the future, exactly as we motivated, as our becoming a Buddha in the long term, so we can be an effortless benefit to sentient beings. That's a long term, but also bring along with it our own result, our happiness. Delightful, how amazing. And that's it. So Jangchub Semcho Rinpoche Ma Ke Panam Ke Guchi Ke Panyampa Me Payang Gongne Gonu Habasho Gewa Di Nudu Dag Lama Sange Trugyone Droa Chikyang Malu Pa Dei Sala Gurpa Shog. And let's just do, if we can put it up there, can we put up the prayer, the swift return prayer for Lama Zopa Rinpoche? Can we do that, please? Here we go. Let's pray for the swift return of Rinpoche. So Lama Zopa, I should tell you some nice, couple of people have had dreams. Let's tell you a few things, okay? So a year ago, Kandala told somebody, that Lady Lama, you know, she had a vivid dream of Rinpoche. He reached out to her and took her hand and drew her towards him and said he was very happy where he was. And she said it was in the mountains somewhere. She didn't know where. Second, another friend of mine, she heard that story. She told me a dream she had had the previous June. So June last year. Remember she died April before, in April 23. In June 24, she had this vivid dream in which she was in this kind of mountainous area. She could see up high. She could see this very lovely village surrounded by a beautiful area, pasture and very nice in the mountains. And she was playing an instrument made of bone. And she was singing into it instead of playing it. And she was singing Ta Ta Om Gate Gate Paragate Paragate Sam Bodhi Soha. And the first time she sang it, the instrument smashed into billions of little atoms. And the second time she sang it, yeah, the last syllables, instead of saying Bodhi Svaha, she said Lama Zopa. And she said it was very insistent. And then she thought, what a wonderful dream. And then she woke up and she thought, Lama Zopa's been reborn. And she went back to sleep. I think that's a good dream.
Yes.
That's June last year. So I remember there's this Hindu clairvoyant being, a man in Kathmandu that Lama Zopa really liked and praised his clairvoyant powers. He has said apparently that he's not going to waste time. He's going to come back very soon. You know, so there's all these indications. But he's not a white American boy, or a girl for that matter. He seems like a Nepali boy. It sounds like it, doesn't it? I'm sure everyone will be pleased about that. Anyway, there you go. So some news, I don't know if it's right or not. Well, that's, anybody had any dreams about him? You had any dreams, Jackie?
Oh, Jane Seidlitz did.
So what?
Jane Seidlitz.
I can't hear you.
Jane Seidlitz.
She had a dream.
Yeah, she sent me a text.
What was the dream?
She dreamt that Rinpoche was speaking. And he was old enough that he was actually speaking.
Oh, wow. So he's born like, he's June. That's in June, that he's 18 months already. So that'd be figured if he's expensive. I should tell her that dream. I'll tell her about it. I haven't told her. That's good. All good news. This is good. So maybe if you haven't known him, I hope you meet him. And if you do know him, we hope he comes back quickly. So he can keep on showing us what we can do, how to be. That's why you need a teacher, isn't it? Okay, people, that's it. I'll see you tomorrow, some of you. And if you die before then, well, please have a happy death. Find a nice human mummy next life. At least that, their bones keep on moving. All right. Goodbye, people. See you, darling. I'm going to close the no, I'll leave the computer open. So I'll go home. Margaret's taking me home to her house.
Oh,
So I'll see you later. We've got now in my own.
Oh, I didn't put it
Venerable, thank you.
Thank you, people. You know where it is.
Thank you all.
Yeah, thank you.
Yeah.
Yeah, we're done.
I'm done.
Enjoy yourself.
And then